Super. And hi, Marissa. Nice to see you. I think Dr. Wanapa is not going to join today, so it's we'll have to make it without her. So Jenny, it's going to be on you to keep us organized.
Great.
Sure. We'll do
Can you see
that.
me and hear me okay?
Yes. Hi, Marissa. Thank you for
Hi, how
joining.
are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
thank you
Rachel tells me she had a wonderful time in Thailand.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and she said this time around, she felt like there was more energy and she could be a little more helpful because more sites are doing thrombectomy now. Because the sites are so good at what they do, we were becoming almost redundant. But at least, she felt like there was something she could offer.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. And thank you for the tips on it. We're going to have a discussion with the president, Dr. Pui, on 1:30 on December 5th. I think it's Dr. Marion Dale and Amy Hiller. Is that right? They're going to help sort of discuss some of the potential points of collaboration moving forward. So thank you for those connections.
I just was muted. I said outstanding. That's great. Those two are both wonderful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So are we, Jenny, let us know when you're ready.
I think let's wait for 2 more minutes and then we can start since we're going to record this video anyway, and then we can put it on the online platform.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marissa, for presenting. Really appreciate it.
Sure, of course.
I think we can start and then hope we have more people joining in the middle.
All right, sounds good. Can you see my slides okay?
Sure can.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Marissa Kellogg. I've been involved with the BDMS OHSU partnership since 2017, kind of crazy. It's been an amazing partnership, and I've got some old photos at the end of this lecture to share the memories. But what I'm going to be talking about today is genetic testing for epilepsy and stroke, and then kind of just put the idea out there, would BDMS consider a neurogenetics clinic or a prevention or precision medicine clinic? And just also wanted to say before I get started, this is the view from the VA hospital here in Portland, sunrise taken by one of our EEG technologists. Yeah, come visit again. Right, so sorry, this is not advancing. There we go. I do not have any disclosures beyond my employment at OHSU in the Portland VA, and this presentation reflects my own personal views and research and not that of the federal or state government. So the learning objectives for the lecture today is to broadly review our current understanding of epilepsy genetics, which has advanced rapidly over the past 20 years, and identify who might benefit from genetic testing for epilepsy according to recent scientific evidence-based guidelines. I'll also discuss the risks and benefits of genetic testing so people can make informed decisions. I'll briefly review stroke genetics, and testing that could be considered there, although I'm not an expert in that area. And then finally, I'll introduce the concept of a neurogenetics or precision medicine prevention clinic integrated with neurology. Of note, I won't be discussing different types of genetic tests currently available or any person-specific recommendations, but I'll provide some trustworthy references and resources at the end so you can learn more if you're interested. So why do I care about this topic? What's my personal motivation? Over the past, basically for the same amount of time that I've been involved in the BDMS partnership since 2017, I've increasingly been taking care of lots of people with epilepsy related to genetic susceptibilities. And one thing that we've learned, which we weren't as sure of 10 years ago, is that adults with adult onset epilepsy can frequently have genetic causes of their epilepsy. Similarly, we're discovering a lot more genetic causes for stroke. So it's pertinent to both. But some of those people that have motivated, my interest in this topic include a 42-year-old veteran and VA employee with drug-resistant epilepsy who died of sudden unexplained death in epilepsy. Why? We now know that there are over 100 genes implicated in SUDEP. If we had figured one of those out for him, could we have figured out a targeted therapy and would he be alive today? Another case had a 36-year-old man with a long history of episodic spells of loss of consciousness and a child with seizures who was found to have a pathogenic variant in the KCNH2 gene, which is associated with seizures and arrhythmia, including long QT syndrome on epilepsy gene panel testing. And he was referred to cardiology. And that's a pathogenic variant that is commonly associated with sudden unexplained death. So, will this prevent that from happening in him or his child? We won't know unless we start sending testing. I've also had a 28-year-old woman who was previously totally healthy, working full time, who started developing bizarre behavior, verbal unresponsiveness, was admitted to a psychiatry hospital for 2 months, and then had a tonic-clonic seizure, was found to be in refractory status epilepticus, and was found to have a pathogenic gene variant in a gene called POLG1. And finally, more recently, I had a 39-year-old veteran with focal epilepsy incidentally found to have mutation in the MGH2 gene, which is consistent with Lynch syndrome, which is a hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer syndrome. So in each of these cases, their genetic diagnosis affected the course of their treatment, and these were all adult onset, conditions. So there are definitely genetic causes and susceptibilities to adult onset seizures, and I'll briefly demonstrate later stroke as well. So just to briefly review, what is genetic testing for clinical indications? It's testing that sends a person's DNA to identify genes, chromosomes, or proteins in their body. DNA changes, also known as genetic variants, previously referred to mostly as mutations, can indicate a genetic condition, disease, or more commonly an increased risk for developing a condition or disease. And that's important, and that's something that we've increasingly recognized over the past 10 years since the genomic revolution, that the genes that we're discovering today are not classic Mendelian conditions. They have reduced penetrance or very heterogeneous presentations. So, one gene does not equal one disease. It means an increased risk for one or many more diseases. And now a DNA sample can be collected by blood draw or simply a cheek swab or a saliva kit. So it's really easy these days. So how many epilepsy genes are there? If there was an audience of people, I'd start asking, do you think there's more than 100, more than 200, more than 500? There are actually over 1,000 now. over 1,000 epilepsy-associated genes. And you can see in this graph that since the first discovery of an epilepsy gene in 1997 through 2023, there's just been an exponential increase in the rate of new genes discovered. It's pretty astounding. And next generation sequencing is the technology, that's really advanced our field, particularly in the last 20 years, and greatly improved the speed and precision of genetic testing. And then also increased genetic testing of individuals and huge multinational data sharing efforts have led to a better understanding of genetic risk. And another component has been collaboration with disease advocacy organizations that has pushed the field forward. Here's just an example of the many disease advocacy organizations or nonprofits that have pushed the epilepsy field forward, at least in North America. So is a certain type of epilepsy caused by damage to a certain gene? Sometimes a single pathogenic gene mutation or pathogenic variant causes one type of epilepsy, but it's, as I mentioned before, it's usually more complicated. Often a single gene mutation can cause a spectrum of different types of epilepsy and associated conditions. And I do want to also say this approach is increasingly relevant to stroke as well. But you know, we're more and more recognizing that epilepsy can also be polygenic, meaning that somebody's risk of seizures is increased by combinations of genetic variants, not just a single gene. However, genes rarely act in isolation. And there are, of course, as everybody knows, many environmental factors that also influence phenotype, you know, which is a fancy word for observable characteristics. So is all genetic epilepsy inherited from a parent? No. Genetic epilepsies are not necessarily inherited from a biological parent. There's what we call de novo mutations, which in Latin means new onset. And this is a term that we use to describe gene mutations that are not inherited from parents. De novo mutations can arise either at conception, when the sperm is meeting the egg, and those are called germline mutations, and those are present in all cells in the body, leading to genetic changes throughout the body, you know, consistently. But increasingly, we're also finding that, you know, if there is a mutation that arises after conception, say, you know, what's happening to this little purple cell right here, as then the person, develops and grows, this is how mosaicism occurs, where the mutation is only found in certain little patches in certain parts of the body. And those are called somatic variants or somatic de novo variants, as opposed to germline. So who should get genetic testing for epilepsy? There are now evidence-based practice guidelines that were published in 2023 that strongly recommend genetic testing and counseling for all individuals with unexplained epilepsy at any age. They further recommend that genetic tests be selected, ordered, and interpreted by a qualified healthcare provider in the setting of appropriate pre-test and post-test genetic counseling. So why is genetic testing for epilepsy important? I can answer people's question, why do I have epilepsy? Unfortunately, there's currently not a straightforward answer for at least half of people with epilepsy. And genetic testing can answer this question for an increasing number of people affected. My patients will also ask me, what are my chances of seizure freedom? Certain genes and gene variants are associated with different prognoses over the life course, though there's a lot of heterogeneity. And finally, what is the best treatment for my type of epilepsy? Increasingly, there are precision medicine treatment implications for different types of genetic epilepsies. For example, people with a certain SCN1A gene variant might benefit from sodium channel blocking medications like lamotrigine or oxcarb, while others should avoid these same medications. So how can genetic testing inspire the formation of advocacy groups? if you get a genetic test and you find out that you have a certain rare gene variant, often people will reach out on social media or email or go on YouTube or Google and try and learn more. They can then learn more at reputable websites like the Epilepsy Foundation, or talk to their friends, their family, their providers, other people affected. And in that way, by bringing these people together who have shared, genetic diagnoses, these groups have really pushed for more research to be done for us to understand these genes. And this has been a huge way that epilepsy genetics knowledge has been gathered. So what are the risks and benefits of testing? Benefits include a sense of relief from uncertainty. They help people make informed decisions about managing their health care. They might save the patient and family from further unnecessary diagnostic procedures, and they may help in the selection of optimal therapy and direct a person towards available monitoring and treatment options. Some test results also help people make decisions about having children, and again, they can connect with others who are similarly affected. The risks or limitations of testing is that it can lead to emotional, social, or financial consequences. People might feel angry, depressed, anxious, or guilty about the results, and it may affect family relationships because the results can reveal information about family members other than the person who is tested. Particularly concerning are when there's cases of non-paternity or consanguinity, which is when closely people who are closely related have children together. There is the possibility of genetic discrimination in employment or insurance. In the US, there were some laws passed in 2008 to try and protect against this. However, there still can be discrimination in life insurance or disability insurance. And I don't know the laws in Thailand at this time. And then, most commonly, results can be uninformative, incomplete, or misinterpreted. And because we're still, so early in our understanding of genetic conditions, even if you find something pathogenic or, associated with a diagnosis, it can be hard to respond, and there are very limited precision medicine implications at this time, although that's changing. So if people choose to get tested, how does it work? You'll see that, starting here, patient presents, you look at do the workup, the whole clinical picture. In the case of epilepsy, if no cause has been identified, you'll send genetic testing either with blood or cheek swab. This will be sent to a lab for sequencing. They'll generate a genetic report that'll be provided to the person's healthcare providers and ideally also a genetic counselor. They'll meet with the patient and discuss the potential implications, and the case might be solved or it might be unsolved. That particular genetic test might have been inadequate at looking for other genetic conditions, so they might recommend retesting, or they might need further clarification of how that gene might be affecting the disease through functional testing. So one thing to note is overall the likelihood of identifying a genetic cause decreases with increasing age at onset. So the younger somebody is at the time of seizure onset, the more likely there's gonna be a genetic cause, and particularly groups that have higher incidence of genetic epilepsy are people with severe childhood onset epilepsies, intellectual disability, autism, congenital brain abnormalities, drug-resistant epilepsy, or a strong family history, at least one first-degree relative or 2 second-degree relatives with epilepsy. So what will the genetic testing results tell us? In 2015, the American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics a practice guideline for the interpretation of genetic sequence variants, and basically recommend label them on a spectrum from pathogenic being definitively linked to a disease or, molecular diagnosis, as opposed to likely pathogenic, where, some evidence supports that it might be a cause of disease, but not yet sure, and more data is needed to definitive, to be certain about that. And, I think unfortunately what we've encountered most often in our epilepsy patients in adult epilepsy clinic is variants of uncertain significance, which, or VUSs. What this means is it's kind of an equivocal result. So it currently remains unclear whether this variant could be linked with the epilepsy or the phenotype at this time, or not. And as more data comes in, as more people are tested, these VUSs will be reclassified. When more family testing is done, or model testing, enzymatic assays, RNA sequencing, new clinical reports, and population data, that kind of thing, can lead to reclassification of these variants as either pathogenic or benign. And then finally, sometimes testing does not show anything. So no clear genetic cause is identified, but it's important to know that an uninformative result does not mean that a genetic cause is excluded, but rather that a genetic cause can not be determined with the methodology that you're using for the genetic testing at that time. So it still means that later on, something might be discovered. And then, so what kind of results do you expect with your genetic test? Depending on the type of test, you may or may not be able to choose to receive certain information on the variants associated with epilepsy, such as the secondary findings. So the primary findings are the part of the report that are related directly to the condition that's being tested for, like epilepsy. Secondary findings are kind of incidental findings, or results that are unrelated to the epilepsy, but may have significant implications for the person's health. And common examples for those include cancer susceptibility genes like BRCAs, the Lynch syndrome that I mentioned earlier, cardiac arrhythmia genes, and other, serious cardiac condition genes. And again, what are the limitations of genetic testing? A negative test does not exclude the possibility of an underlying genetic disease. Many variants of uncertain significance reported that will become better understood over time. And again, several types of genetic variants are not robustly detected with next generation sequencing methods. There are other methods for different types of presentations, like multiple congenital abnormalities or developmental delays and that kind of thing. So again, emerging evidence may lead to reclassification. If you want to learn more, this is a great resource for healthcare providers who are not, genetics experts. And it's publicly available online. And it's a resource designed to help non-geneticist healthcare providers understand genomic medicine and genome sequencing, and how to talk with patients about results. So if genetic testing is potentially so helpful, why isn't everyone doing it? Even in the US, where we're been leading the way in this field, only a minority of people have still been tested. And this is because, as we neurologists and neurology nurses haven't really gotten a ton of dedicated genetics teaching, and there are very limited access to genetic specialists and counselors. At a recent genetics meeting nationally, I actually met the international leader for a genetic counselor based in Singapore, and she mentioned to me that at this time, Thailand does not have officially licensed genetic counselors, but that it's in the works. So I would imagine, that they're probably limited access to geneticists and genetic counselors, which we also face but we can still send testing, despite these barriers. But other barriers, it's a rapidly evolving field, it's difficult to stay current, and it's time intensive to send these tests. There's paperwork, counseling, follow-up, responding to results, reevaluations, insurance authorization, et cetera. So, it's can be challenging, and cost and insurance authorization can be a challenge. So if you have patients that do ask you about pursuing or considering genetic testing for epilepsy, what do I tell them? I tell them to ask their neurologist about testing, and here we'd usually refer them. Most places will refer somebody to a genetic counselor or medical geneticist, which are physicians specially trained in genetic medicine. However, some neurologists, like neurologists here at OHSU, depending on their subspecialty, and pediatricians are increasingly feeling comfortable sending testing themselves. We here at OHSU have sent tests on over 300 adults with epilepsy, and we found that 26% have pathogenic findings. And this is over the last 5 years. And our pediatric colleagues have sent a lot more testing. If you want to learn more about testing options and guidance, these are 2 great websites to learn more. And here are some fantastic webinars. And I'll send along my slides afterwards so you can learn more about the genetic testing options for epilepsy. Shifting gears to stroke, and this will be brief. How many genes have been implicated in stroke? Well, a recent reanalysis by Alinka et al. In a paper called Updated Stroke Gene Panels found that 168 genes have been reported in at least one person with stroke, and 70 of these have been validated for clinical practice. And 72 genes are related to diseases that might predispose to stroke. So, and in this figure, the genes in the dark squares are newly identified, and the ones in the light squares are more well-established genes. So how did they come up with all these genes? The authors did a OMIM and PubMed search originally in 2017, and in their 2022 reevaluation, they found an increasing number of genes from 106 to 168 found in at least one patient with stroke, and also identified increasing numbers of single gene diseases that are associated with stroke. And they classified these based on the type of stroke, including large artery atherosclerosis, large artery non-atherosclerotic stroke, small vessel disease, cardioembolic, coagulopathy associated, vascular malformation associated, and metabolic, and then an intracranial hemorrhage, vasculitis, white matter hyperintensities, and basal ganglia calcifications. So tons of genes are increasingly being recognized. And just some examples of these genes and by different types of stroke. So COL4A1 and 2 have been associated with any kind of stroke, as well as small vessel stroke and intracerebral hemorrhage. That is a gene associated with impaired collagen deposition in vessel walls. PITX2 has been associated with ischemic stroke and cardioembolic stroke. That one's involved in cardiac development, electrical and structural remodeling. There is a gene associated with dissections, cervical artery dissections, called FACTR1. This has an unknown function, or at least at the time of the writing of the article it did. But as you can see, there are a variety of different genes associated with different combinations of types of strokes. And, in the not too distant future, I think some will have precision medication implications. Already, conditions like Fabry's disease, which is associated with strokes, do have precision medication treatments. So one huge challenge, though, in this field is that, unfortunately, these studies are still largely being performed in European populations. And I've circled as of 2022, there's a very small representation, less than 1%, from individuals of Asian ancestry. This is rapidly changing. I think China has made a big effort to conduct large cohort studies, increasingly utilizing genetic testing, and some really incredible work has come out of China on this topic in the last couple of years. So what can we do? Finally, last couple slides, what can we do about this rapidly changing landscape? Increasingly, I've just shown some pictures. Different places are starting neurogenetics clinics at University of Washington, UCLA, Mayo Clinic, OHSU is a neurogenetics clinic, but increasingly neurologists and particularly neurology subspecialists are becoming parts of these multidisciplinary clinics to improve access to testing and inform, what can be done about the results. And there's good evidence for this in this. This one clinic looked at performing whole exome sequencing in people with neurologic disorders to figure out the advantages and disadvantages of using whole exome sequencing in a neurology clinic. They used it in 209 consecutive cases at a hospital in Barcelona, generated from neurology or clinical geneticist referrals. And they found molecular causes, genetic causes in 32% of patients. In this diagram, these are their results. The blue bars indicate the percentage of cases in which a pathogenic variant has been detected. The red bars indicate variants of uncertain significance, and the green bars indicate cases in which no responsible variant was detected. And you can see they looked at ataxia, spastic paraplegia, which had, the highest rates of pathogenic findings, dystonias, Parkinsonism had over 30%, intellectual disability also with high rates of genetic causes, autism spectrum disorder, epilepsy, of course, and then other other neurologic diseases. So, is it time that BDMS also, considers a neurogenetic clinic or precision medicine or prevention clinic? I think BDMS is very well situated to potentially roll out this kind of intervention and have access to some of the same genetic testing companies we do, depending on insurance coverage and that kind of thing. So I think there's, over the many years we've worked with BDMS, you have such cutting edge technologies, incredibly trained providers. I think you could also be a leader in this field. And so finally, I just want to also say thank you, BDMS, for such a great learning adventure. This was from one of our first trips, Dr. Champong taking us on an adventure with the nursing team, and just have had incredible visits and great conversations and great exchange of ideas. So again, just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this partnership. And I, when my kids are a little bit older, I am so excited to come back to Thailand and say hello to everybody. So yeah, that was the lecture, and please let me know if you have questions about anything.
Anybody from the on-site have any questions? Dr. อภิชาติคะ
Hello, thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. And I don't know, Dr. Shripathi is in the line or no?
I don't
Sorry?
think so.
No, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I would like to thank all of you also, because being a partnership with the OSSU is wonderful. We get a lot of more information. We get in touch. Of those in a lecture. So I mean, keep us update on what the world are doing, and what we are doing, and what OSSU is doing. So yeah, like you say, in the future, if you come back to Thailand, just say hello, and then we can get it together, with your children, and it should be great time to visit Thailand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, for everything, though. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
อาจารย์นันทศักดิ์ขาอาจารย์มีอะไรเพิ่มเติมไหมคะ
โอ้คงไม่มีครับผม
Thank you so much อาจารย์ Any question from any side on regarding today's lectures? I think it's too early in the morning.
I'm just curious about any genetic testing which is planned, or is there any priority for this after this excellent presentation? Are there any thoughts about doing this in the future with your patients?
Actually,
Yeah, I mean, oh, are you asking? Yeah, we're routinely testing lots of our epilepsy patients now. I actually just got 2 research grants to look at the genetic causes of post-stroke epilepsy and post-traumatic epilepsy. So I'll be diving into the genetics of those populations using a large database with the Million Veteran Program. But a dream would also be to build a multidisciplinary neurogenetics clinic here at OHSU. We do have a neurogenetics clinic that right now has a medical geneticist, but it's got like a 8 to 12 month wait list, and he can't accommodate all of our referrals. Because more and more genes are being discovered, and more genetic etiologies are being found. So it's an exciting field right now, but also one that is so quickly evolving, and the staffing hasn't caught up with the demand. Oh, you're muted.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that, Marissa. That's very exciting. Congratulations on the grants. That's really exciting. What about in Thailand? Are there plans for testing there? What are your plans in Thailand?
Actually, in Thailand, we have the lab sending to Mayo Clinic, because I think one of our staff, Dr. Chanchila, she very interesting in of these rare neurological condition. Sometimes we couldn't diagnose it with the routine lab that we send. We have to send the CSF or blood test to see whether for the immunology cause or autoimmune, for the genetic testing. And mostly I think we affiliate with the Mayo Clinic, to send off these lab tests to check with them. I mean, personally, for Parkinson's disease, I try to ask my patient age below 50 years old to see whether they would like to do the genetic testing to see what the cause of it, though. But the result may be only below than 10% that you're gonna find the genetic cause. Most of patients they don't want to know, but say like I have some foreigner patient that which they want to know exactly what causing their Parkinson's disease. So I can send the blood test and see whether you got the gene or not getting the gene. The treatment will be the same. So sometimes patient still afraid, whether and then if we send it, we need to consult like neurogenetic or the genetician, and then let them give advice to the patient. So a lot of work to do, but in some patient I would do send the patient to testing for the genetic. But I think for stroke they have more information, right? In young stroke patient, I think all the cases they have to send to test to see whether they have the genetic cause of the stroke or not. A young onset. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I was
Marissa,
actually
that's gonna-
curious how often we're sending them at OHSU right now for stroke.
So if it is a patient, especially with a family history of stroke, and not even necessarily super young, because we're seeing more strokes in the young with the obesity epidemic, more drug abuse, various other contributors. But I would say family history, and then just unexpected findings, especially MRI abnormalities such as white matter disease, then we are testing. So there's a migraine and strokes panel that we can simply send off. But for the more complicated patients, for example, sometimes those panels come back negative, and yet I am positive that a genetic cause is the only possibility. Then I send those to our genetics clinic. But Marissa, I was going to make the comment that I was surprised in one of the studies that only 31% had small vessel disease, at least in one patient, because my experience has been that small vessel disease patients are the most likely to have genetic causes. Certainly we do see some with, the connective tissue disorders and things like that, but I was surprised it wasn't higher. That's exactly the slide. Thank you. Yeah. The third column over there. And I mean, that's simply the finding. And they do have a lot of hemorrhage patients in there. So it probably, swung the data in that direction. That was very interesting for me, Marissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great pictures too. Well, I'll go on record saying if you ever wanted to sort of collaborate, it sounds like Dr. Kellogg will be building up sort of a database and doing more research on this. If we ever can partner in the future, maybe to help do a multi-center research repository to look at this, please keep us in mind. This presentation might be a catalyst to start something like that in the future. So we'll plant that seed today.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I would be very eager to see. I'm kind of curious. It sounds like you send most of your labs to Mayo Clinic. I know Invitae is also available in Thailand and other gene testing companies. So it would be interesting to kind of track those over time and report those results.
Cool. Any other questions? ทางบ้านมีคำถามอีกไหมคะ Okay, I think we will keep that in mind in anything that the team is interesting or anything that coming up. We will drop email through Justin, and then we'll see how can we collaborate in the future.
Thank you,
Anyway,
Jenny.
thanks for the great lectures, and I hope that this will be one of the projects in the future too.
Lovely. Good to see everyone.
Good to see everyone, and then wish you all the best in the Thanksgiving weekend.
Thank
And
you, Jenny.
then-
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good holiday next month. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Welcome. Swadika.
So
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks.
สวัสดีครับ Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you,ค่ะ.
ครับสวัสดีครับ
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.